Hey everybody, welcome to our writing workshop. This is Ben Graham, and I am holding a writing workshop not because I think you don't already know how to write a strong essay, but because I want to ask for something very particular in the context of this class. And I think it's a type of writing that is likely to create a lot of value for you in a range of professional settings that you may pass through in your life. So this type of writing begins with the premise that no one has time, right? That the moment you graduate from college is the last moment that anybody is paid to read every word that you write. From that point forward, people read what you write because it creates value for them, right? So as a writer, if you want someone to read what you're putting onto paper, you need to make that a good value proposition for the reader, meaning that you are working really hard on your end to minimize the amount of time and effort it takes for somebody else to extract the ideas from your writing. And this sort of goes back to the basic premise that I've pitched to you before, which is that as a white collar worker, or as somebody who is seeking to make a living based on the ideas that are inside their head, the critical skills in life and in professional life are the ability to take ideas out of your head and put them into somebody else's in an efficient and effortless way for the recipient, right? Which means becoming an excellent public speaker and an excellent writer, right? And a key piece of being an excellent writer in the context of idea transfer, right, is to take the complex and render it simple, right? It's very easy to take a seemingly simple idea and spin up unnecessary complexity, but it's really a lot of work to take something nuanced and to take something very detailed and distill it to its essence and communicate it in a simple and clear way that somebody else can take on board very easily. So we're trying to be simple and we're trying to be very brief, right? We're trying to really respect the time of the person who is reading, or in the case of public speaking, the person who is listening to us. So in the writing context, we're starting with longer drafts and we're cutting them back. We're really looking down at each sentence and each piece of information saying, is this critical? Is this not critical? Is there a more efficient way I could communicate this? Okay. And then organization is king, right? Because the great thing about writing over public speaking is that somebody has the option of not reading every word that you write. And by and large, in a professional context, people do not read every word that you write. People will skim what you write. And so you want to write in such a way that skimming is a very efficient way to digest the words that you've put down, the ideas that you've put down. And the great thing about skimming is that somebody can use the organizational structure of your paper to quickly understand what is in it, and then understand what are the places where they do need to go and read every detail, and what are the places that they do not need to. And that's going to be different for different readers, which allows you to have all the details in there that anyone in a group of readers needs, while not forcing each reader to go through everything, right? Okay. So basic principle, you are working really hard as a writer to make reading easy, right? And when you're trying to communicate really complicated ideas, really technical information, really nuanced information, the prose needs to be really simple, right? So for example, when I'm writing an academic paper, up in the introduction or something, there might be a little bit of flowery language. I might have some semicolons and sentences with multiple clauses to them. When I get down to the methods section and I'm talking about the statistical estimator that I'm using in the paper, we're talking like 8-word sentences, nothing longer than 3 syllables. Like, really, can I make the prose super simple and just break this idea into very digestible chunks, 3 or 4 sentence paragraphs, just really make it bite-sized, make it, this is not a time to allow there to be any sort of extraneous complexity in how you're communicating information. Okay. So if I've told you we want to facilitate skimming, we don't want to force the reader to read every word in what we've written in order to get the points that they need. How do we do that for them? Right. So there's 2 things we're trying to do in the context of a paper like this. We're trying to articulate an argument, and we're trying to provide specific credible evidence to back it up, right? So we are trying to take an idea or an argument and put it inside of somebody else's brain in a compelling way. So we want the reader to be able to really understand quickly what's the argument we're making. Maybe this is a case for why a firm should adopt a particular strategy, or why an NGO should pursue a particular objective or pursue it in a particular way. So we want to make it very clear, what is it we're arguing? What's our point? And then guide the reader, where do they find detailed evidence, essentially for the parts of that argument they find least compelling up front, right? There may be some parts of it they're like, oh yeah, I already agree with you on that. They need to go find the stuff that they don't currently agree with you on, that they need to be convinced on. And that's where they need to go read every detail of the evidence, right? They need to know exactly where in the paper to go to find the evidence that they actually need to see, which will be different for each reader. So this one reader, you've got a 750 word paper. Each reader may only read 200 words of it, but they're going to read a different 200 words. They'll probably each read the introduction and the conclusion and the topic sentences, but then different body paragraphs are going to be necessary for different readers. So you need that clear thesis statement, right? People need to know what's the one sentence takeaway, right? What is the argument you're making? That introduction needs to give them a roadmap, the reader a roadmap for where the different parts of this argument are located through the paper. What are the different components of this argument, and what order do they come in? And then as you get into the body of the paper, the topic sentence, the first sentence of each paragraph, needs to make the point of that paragraph. There shouldn't be any information in a paragraph that I wouldn't expect based on that topic sentence. So if I read a topic sentence and I'm like, oh no, I already agree with that, I should be fine skipping that paragraph, and there shouldn't be anything buried in that paragraph that actually I needed but wouldn't have guessed was there based on the topic sentence. That topic sentence needs to be an accurate guide, right? Evidence has to be where I expect it. Otherwise I'll miss it, right? Because I'm not reading every word. So unless it's where I expect something to be, I'm going to miss it as the reader. In longer papers, subject headings, subheadings, executive summaries up front are super important, right? In a paper as short as the one I'm assigning in this class, you may not need subject headings or sort of subheadings, but they're not, even in a very short paper, they can still be useful depending on what your organizational structure is looking like. Okay, so what does your intro look like? So we're going to sort of go intro, body, conclusion here, right? If it's necessary, briefly provide the reader the relevant facts to drop them in. But you want to drop them into the very specific question as quickly as possible. Give them a couple sentences of to orient them, and then boom, you want to be hitting them with the argument, right? You don't want what we call an inverted pyramid introduction, where you're starting since the dawn of time, man has been wrestling with whether or not the central bank should be independent, and we don't want to start broad, and we just want to drop the reader into our specific argument as fast as possible. The key task of the introduction is to deliver that thesis statement and make it clear. When you read that thesis statement sentence, it should be very clear, this is the argument of the paper. There shouldn't be any ambiguity about when I read an introductory paragraph, what if this is the thesis? That's got to be real clear. And usually kind of as either in the thesis sentence itself, if it has a couple of clauses toward the end, or in the sentences immediately following the thesis statement, you're briefly and simply giving the main points you would use to back up your thesis, right? And then each of these points is going to map to its own paragraph in a short paper or its own section in a longer paper. Okay, so what do each of those body paragraphs look like as we're chunking through the paper? One paragraph, one idea, right? That idea should be directly related to the thesis statement, right? So when I read the topic sentence, that paragraph, there shouldn't be any doubt in my mind, what is this doing in this paper, right? It should be clearly related to the main idea of the paper, right? One paper, one point, one paragraph, one point, right? Which is sort of a supporting point to that main point of the paper overall. And that one paper, one point, that applies even to a 35-page academic paper, right? There is a clean takeaway from a good piece of writing. Each body paragraph shouldn't be that long, right? 3 to 6 sentences. Inevitably, I will see some papers that have, page-long paragraphs. There's probably more than one idea in that paragraph. We need to think about how to break these ideas up into digestible, skimmable chunks for the reader. The topic sentence is going to identify the new idea that's present in that paragraph. And an efficient topic sentence is also going to start to do the work of the paragraph. So the most important job of the thesis statement is to let me know, or sorry, the topic sentence is to let me know what's in that paragraph. But a truly efficient topic sentence is also going to start to do the work of that paragraph. Okay. And then, you know, a good body paragraph, like this is where you're making the argument, right? You've got your topic sentence, which is like, okay, this is the point I'm trying to convince you of in this paragraph. And the body of the paragraph, the remaining sentences are going to provide the detailed, clear evidence for that point, right? Often the final sentence of the paragraph is pointing the reader back up toward the thesis statement. Sometimes this isn't necessary. It's absolutely clear kind of how everything in the paragraph is related to that thesis statement. But sometimes the reader needs to be pointed back, like, remind me what this is doing in terms of supporting the overall argument, right? As I'm exiting that paragraph, I should have known what I was getting heading into the paragraph. I should find the internal logic of the paragraph to be sound and the evidence convincing. And I should exit the paragraph understanding exactly how this information that I've just received contributes to the broader point that the writer is trying to convince me of. Okay, and then I get down to the conclusion of the paper. And in a longer paper, you're going to need to re-summarize essentially the whole paper, right? But in a short paper, that can be redundant, but you probably need to at least be restating the thesis. One of the things you can use your conclusion to do that's really valuable is to give the broader implications of your work, right? This is your chance to kind of explode the argument outward, right? You've kind of started with a cleanly defined thesis statement, and here's the key things I need to convince you of to make you believe the argument overall. I've gone one by one through those things. I've hit them with, you know, hit you with clear, concise, compelling evidence. And now at the end, I have a little bit of time to think about, like, so what? Like, what are you going to do differently in the world now that you've bought what I'm selling, right? You can relate your argument to other ideas and debates. You can speculate about extensions, talk about the broader implications, right? Okay, this is your chance to kind of explode outward a little bit if you want to. All right. The last piece I'm really going to talk about here are citations, right? You know, and why do we provide citations? Why do we have a bibliography or a reference list or extensive footnotes? Like, why do we have citations in a paper? Probably the most important reason is to credit others' intellectual contributions, right? We're standing on the shoulders of giants here, right? Knowledge creation is a cumulative process. We want to acknowledge the intellectual contributions of others. But we also want to guide the reader where to go get further details, right? And we want to provide authority. So if we make a factual statement, right, I want to have a citation back to the underlying data or the underlying source that I drew this from to provide authority for my, you don't have to take my word for it. Here's the authoritative source that I'm citing back to. But also, like, if you then want to go read that whole academic study that this sort of point is drawn from, you know where to go to get those additional details, right? Okay. And so what makes a good source? So the key, probably the most important bullet point here is the last one, which is that any source can be a good source if you use it for what it is, right? So if I'm going to go to www.stopbloodywhaling.org, I may not want to use that site as my reference for the number of whales that are under threat right now, right? That might be maybe an organization that has incentives to exaggerate that number, right? But if I want to use that website as evidence for what arguments activists are making about the whaling industry, that's a very good site for what are activists arguing, right? So it's not the fact that an activist website can never be a good source. It's a good source for what activists are saying, not necessarily a canonical source for underlying data or factual information, right? So the best sources are peer-reviewed articles, right? Like, that's going to be the most authoritative, is a peer-reviewed published academic piece. And then the next best are going to be editor-reviewed work in publications that have a high-value reputation at stake, and particularly a reputation that is tied to factual accuracy, right? So if you have a publication like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or something like this, right? Like, their reputation is based on the credibility of their news. So you might find them pretty reputable. It's not peer-reviewed, right? It's editor-reviewed. And similarly, something like Foreign Affairs, right? It's editor-reviewed, but they have a reputation for factual accuracy that's meaningful to the business model of that publication. So we give them more credibility than something, once you get to more of like a MSNBC or a Fox, they're still journalistic organizations. It's still going to be pretty good, but they get at least, a fair amount of their business model is built around playing to a particular partisan audience as much as neutral, factual information. And so you start to get onto thinner ice there than with news outlets that are whose reputation and business model is built around kind of credibility. Okay, and that's what I've got for you. And I will see you in class to actually workshop your individual papers.